Thank you for joining me. This is the Spiritual Princess. And today I wanted to do something a little bit different. Today I wanted to share some real life stories that I've had as a psychic medium. Have you ever felt the presence of something unseen or wondered if there's more to this world than meets the eye? That's why you probably come to my channel. So as a psychic medium, I have spent my life bridging the gap between the living and the spirit world. But this isn't just about like whispers in the dark or fleeting shadows. This video is going to be about my real experiences, life-changing moments, and the powerful connections that actually shaped my understanding of what lies beyond. From protective spirits guiding me through danger to unexpected encounters that left me speechless. I'm here to share my most unforgettable real-life stories. So if you're ready to step into the unknown, please join me on this journey where the extraordinary becomes personal. Let's begin. So before I fully embraced my abilities, I found it intriguing and sometimes amusing to interact with the spirits that would reveal themselves to me in different ways. And one memorable experience happened after I moved into a house that had soaring vaulted ceilings and an eye-catching half-moon arch window that was above the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. From the kitchen upstairs, I had a clear view into my neighbor's living room, where I often saw them sitting in a chair, staring directly at me. The constant gaze would give me the creeps, so I decided that we needed to cover the window with pleated blinds. They were made out of paper, like a soft material, but when I asked my husband at the time to install it, he struggled with it. It kept falling, and his solution was to tape it, but he flattened the pleats entirely, leaving it looked disastrous. Every time I saw that stupid pleated blind, I thought to myself, oh my God, I need to take that down. It looked like we'd just slapped paper over the window in a hurry. So one night, after many weeks of frustration, I woke up to the unmistakable sound of ripping paper, and it was loud. And as I listened closer, I thought I heard voices. So a moment that set my heart racing, I feared an intruder. So I carefully tiptoed to the kitchen to kind of look around, see if I saw anybody. I didn't see anyone, but my eyes were drawn to the arched window. And there it was. The pleated paper blind had been completely shredded off the window. I stood there in shock for a minute, but a laugh escaped me as I said out loud, "Thanks, spirits," because it had dawned on me that they had heard my thoughts all along and knew exactly what I wanted. I realized the spirits were not only aware but willing to intervene. And little did I know, this was just the beginning of my journey into understanding how deeply connected we are with the spirit world. So another story was the time a spirit saved me from burglars. One unforgettable night, it was right before Christmas. I had gone on a business trip for 2 days, but I was back. And a spirit saved us from an encounter with burglars. Again, I was living in a tri-level home where the master bedroom was upstairs next to the kitchen, while my son's room was actually on the lowest level at the back of the house, but it was right under my room. There was a side road in the back of our house with no street lights. It made the nights eerily dark back there. As you enter my bedroom, the floorboard had a distinct creak, a sound that I'd come to know well. So that night I was fast asleep when the familiar creaking noise woke me up. My first thought was, oh, my son had wandered upstairs into my room. So I sat up, expecting to see him, but no one was there. Then, out of nowhere, I heard two voices coming from the backyard. My heart began to race, and I made my way to the bedroom window. I cracked it open a little, and I was trying to hear what was being said. And to my shock, I overheard a man and a woman talking in hushed tones, but I heard the man say, "I thought you said they weren't home." So that realization hit me like a lightning bolt. They were planning to break in. My instincts, of course, kicked in. I shouted out the window at them. They didn't wait around to see who was yelling. They took off around the house through my gate, disappearing into the night. But I was still shaken. I flipped on every light in the house. I rushed to the lower level where my son was sleeping, and it turned out they had been attempting to break into his bedroom window. Thankfully, he slept with a light on, which likely deterred them from making the move, but I couldn't help but think of what might have happened if I hadn't woken up. That creak, the sound that woke me, felt less like chance and more like spiritual intervention, protecting my son from what could have been terrifying. And it was at that moment that cemented my belief in the unseen forces. They were actually looking out for us. So were they spirits of people unknown? Were they angels, guides, or my loved ones? This is how spirit works. Another story is the time that spirit saved me from getting a speeding ticket. When I was a freshly minted driver, still reveling in the freedom of having my license, I had an unforgettable experience. I was literally 16 years old. One afternoon, as I zipped down the road with the music blaring, a clear, commanding male voice echoed in my ear that said, "Slow down." It startled me because I was the only one in the car. I immediately checked my speed and realized I was going faster than I should have been. I eased off the gas, wondering where that voice had come from. But not a moment later, as I approached the next block, I spotted him. A police officer crouched behind a massive bush, radar gun in hand, lying in wait for unsuspecting speedsters like me. My heart pounded as I passed. I was relieved that I wasn't the one that he was going to get that day. But if I hadn't slowed down, he definitely would have had me in his sights. And I would have been mortified getting a ticket so soon after getting my license. For many years, I couldn't explain the voice, but I was beyond grateful for the mysterious warning that saved me from a run-in with the law and from freaking out about my driving record before it even had a chance to begin. So here's a horrible story, actually, about the time spirit scared my husband. He was devout Catholic, and so he thought anything to do with spirit communication and all that was evil. And that was another reason that I had not really embraced my abilities for many years. But one night, I took my husband to a work event, and I left my son in the care of my parents, who lived about 2 miles away. Now, as a manager for many, many years, it was my job to be social and professional with everyone, but my husband's insecurities made him uncomfortable whenever I spoke to like a male coworker. So instead of handling it maturely, he decides to drown his feelings in alcohol at this event, and things quickly spiraled out of control. He began doing shots one after the other, drinking heavily, and that felt like an attempt to humiliate me. But his behavior became really rude, not just towards me, but also toward my colleagues. Then, as if the night hadn't gone far enough off the rails, he proceeded to vomit all over himself in front of everyone. The scene left my coworker stunned and me utterly mortified. I could not believe what I was witnessing. With as much composure as I could muster, I announced, "We're leaving. Apparently someone can't handle their liquor. Ha ha ha." but I was so overwhelmingly embarrassed. The car ride home was nothing short of heated. I mean, I yelled at him the entire way, telling him, I will never, ever do this again. How dare you do that in front of my bosses and coworkers? I mean, I was humiliated. So when we got home, I dropped him off, I grabbed the dog, and I headed straight to my parents' house where my son was. I could not bear to stay under the same roof with my husband. And his repeated phone calls that night went unanswered. But the next day he called. He sounded extremely upset and shaken. He said that he didn't sleep all night because the house was alive with paranormal activity, and of course blamed me. And what happened was the spirits, sensing how upset I was, had taken matters into their own hands. He described pounding on the walls, windows, doors, slamming doors. They even moved furniture around to terrify him. So by the time I returned home, he had a Bible out, desperate for protection. And I decided then and there that enough was enough. I had had enough of that behavior. He was growing worse day by day, and I was not about to raise my son in that kind of environment. So I told him to leave. And interestingly, I felt that the spirits had also taken a stand. They seemed upset with him too. Over the years, I'd made a connection with those spirits by saying thank you for things they had been doing for me and protecting me. So I believe they had become protective of me too. And they stepped in when they saw mistreatment unfolding. So that night, the spirits showed they were watching, and so was I. It was the final push I needed to reclaim peace in my life and get that bum out of my home. Another story, which I think I've told this on another video before, about poking around haunted locations that you really shouldn't. So if you hadn't heard that, I'm going to retell this story. It was the time my son's male guide destroyed a pure evil spirit from harming me and my son. So one unforgettable night, my son and I joined a friend who was also psychic, and she wanted to visit an old cemetery that's nestled deep into the Colorado mountains where I live. And this place has a very eerie charm to it. It's over 100 years old. There's prostitutes and outlaws buried there. There's, families from the Old West also buried there. But I had been there a couple times without any problems. But this one night, my friend insisted we explore. And the moment we passed through the gates, I got an overwhelming sense of unease. It just washed over me, unlike anything I'd ever felt before. So we strolled down this dirt path, and I felt like darkness just pressing in around us. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed black shadows darting along the sides, as if unseen figures were circling us. My heart raced, and my friend got scared, but suddenly I collided with something solid, and it stopped me in my tracks, but there was nothing visible. I mean, we were in the dark, but you could see with the moon, the light of the moon kind of was bright and we could see. So I felt as though a towering man had appeared in front of me that held out a hand to signal stop. And that's when it hit me. We were in danger. I knew right then and there. And it wasn't the danger that you can see, but it was something far more sinister. So I told everyone to stop and turn around. We're going back. And as we walked, I was in the back and I could hear distinct footsteps trailing us, an eerie echo on the dirt path. And of course, we're in the dark, all alone, just us. So I told my son, get in the car. And my friend hurried back to her Jeep. Before getting into my car, I stopped and turned around because I felt something following us. And I yelled into the void, "Back off. We are leaving." And so my words felt powerful, and I didn't really dwell on it. We had an hour-long drive home. I just wanted to get out of there, and so did my friend. So once I got home, I was in bed. My son went to his room and played some video games for a little while. The calm didn't last long. I woke up to this chilling sound of a man screaming at me, shouting insults and threats. He was going to kill me, and he hated me, and he called me every name in the book. But it sounded like it was coming from a tunnel. And I recognized this as how I hear earthbound spirits that haven't crossed over. It's like they're far away because I'm so protected. So in my mind, I firmly told my guides, angels, loved ones, I said, I don't know who this is, but I knew it wasn't good, and they're not welcome, so get rid of them. So just as I settled back into bed, chaos erupted. I heard what sounded like two men brawling in my bedroom, walls shaking, floorboards creaking, the unmistakable thuds of a violent struggle. I mean, my heart raced as I flipped on the lights, only to find the room eerily quiet, and the stillness almost mocking me. I sat there like, what in the world? I was nervous, but then I asked my guides, I said, what in the world just happened? And a deep, calm voice answered, and he even had an accent, and he said, don't worry about it. He's sleeping with the fishes. That's when it all clicked. I had seen enough episodes of The Sopranos to understand the meaning behind those words. So the next day, I asked my guides the full story. I said, what happened? And they said, the spirit I had yelled at in the cemetery was pure evil. He had no light remaining, and he had latched onto me because how dare a woman speak to him like that? And he saw me as a target. He even tried to mess with my son, but he didn't count on my son's powerful guide, Anthony. He went by Tony for short. And yes, Tony was once a mafia man when he was alive. He came complete with a pinstripe suit, hat, and smoked a cigar. We had encountered him many, many times previously to this, but he was the one who stopped me in the cemetery and ultimately fought off the malevolent spirit that followed us home. Tony didn't just defend us, he dissolved that spirit back into love and light. And that's a fate reserved for those who attempt to harm in the spirit world. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the intervention and for the protective forces, I should say, that surrounded us when I asked for help. So that night reminded me of the profound connection we share with the unseen, with our guides, angels, loved ones, and the lengths they will go in order to keep us safe. Which is why in many of my videos I will tell people to call on angels if you are in any kind of danger or you feel like you're in danger. They will help you if you believe they will help you. So the last story for this video is the time my grandma in spirit protected my son in a bad car accident. It all began with a car that I absolutely despised, a lemon that I never wanted in the first place. The dealership had royally screwed me over during a messy trade-in, and it forced me into a car that I did not want. And it was such a fiasco. This dealership had been sued many times. I had to consult an attorney over it. But anyway, I hated this car so much that I would joke far too often about wanting to total this piece of junk. My coworkers even got in on it, asking, did you ever total that POS yet? And I'd always laugh and reply, not today. And looking back, I had no idea how powerful those words were or how much energy I was putting into manifesting such a negative outcome. So, lesson learned, never ever joke like that. So one weekend, my relatives had invited me and my mom to come visit their new bingo. They had opened a new bingo hall. And we didn't have any other plans, so me, my mom, and my son decided to make the trip. It was a kind of long drive. It wasn't real close. And the night before, I had taken my 5-year-old son to one of the last drive-ins that were still open in our area, because I wanted to give him a slice of the childhood that I remembered going to the drive-in. So the back seat was filled with pillows and blankets from the night at the movies, and it created a cozy little nest for my son. So that night, as we left my relative's little bingo, my son decided to crawl into the back seat and fall asleep with the pillows and blankets. But he took off his seatbelt, and I wasn't aware of that. We were on was a country kind of highway. It was completely empty. I do remember cruising at about 70 miles an hour. I had put it on cruise control, and I was chatting with my mom. We were listening to music. I mean, the road stretched ahead of us clear and calm until it wasn't. So my mom, as I'm looking at her to my right, my mom suddenly gasped and her eyes were fixed on something to my left. And before I could even turn my head and react, I hit something, and it felt like slamming into a brick wall. My car didn't stop immediately. It just kept moving for what felt like an eternity before coming to a mangled halt. Of course, dazed in pain, I turned to check on my son. My mom called his name, but there was no answer. So of course, panic surged through me as I reached back, feeling for him, and my hand touched his arm, but he was on the floor behind my seat, and he was cushioned by the pillows and blankets. So relief and fear flooded me all at once. My dashboard and steering wheel were smashed and just landed in my lap, and my car looked like it had folded in half, like bent in half. Somehow, despite my injuries, I managed to shove the driver's door open, only to see my thumb hanging limp from the force of the airbag on the steering wheel. In full mama bear mode, I ripped the back seat door open and pulled my son out. Miraculously, he was fine, just got the air knocked out of him from the impact, and he was completely unaware what happened because he had been sleeping. My mom was okay too, with an exception to a cut on her leg, but her door was jammed shut. Luckily, the car that had been far behind us stopped, and these kind strangers helped until the ambulance arrived. The cause of the crash? Some reckless idiot driver had run a stop sign crossing the highway, and I plowed into him at full force. He tried to argue that my headlights weren't on, but the police quickly shut that down, pointing out my car's automatic running lights were on, even if I had forgotten to put them on. If the dashboard hadn't had a safety clip designed to collapse on impact, I wouldn't have made it. At the hospital, I was told that I'd fractured neck and back, along with a broken wrist, and my thumb would need to be reattached. So my injuries could have been so much worse, but what truly shook me was what my son told me later. He said that little grandma, which was my grandmother who had passed away, I think about a year prior, had held him down and pushed him behind the seat into the safety of the blankets and pillows. And I thought, what? He's 5 years old, and that's when I kind of realized my son was a medium. But I really didn't think much about it. I remember thanking her, like, oh, thank you, that's awesome. I'm so thankful you saved my son. But it was just going on what he said. Years later, this is how spirit works. They wanted to make sure I really fully understood. So years later, I'm talking like 8 years later, I was teaching a psychic class, and a student described my grandmother perfectly, because they were giving readings to each other and they could read me too. And so this student described my grandma perfectly, and she said, your grandma protected a little boy during a really bad car accident you were in. And hearing her describe how she held my son and pushed him down so he wouldn't fly out the front window, it hit me like a tidal wave of emotion. I broke down in tears. Now, as a medium, I'm used to giving others messages that leave them in tears, but I wasn't prepared to receive one like that. But I needed to hear that. For some reason, I needed it to really sink in. It made me realize just how deeply connected we are to our loved ones on the other side. As for the car, I was beyond thrilled to see that piece of junk finally totaled. And with the settlement money that I received, I was able to buy the car that I truly wanted. A car I still own today, 22 years later, and it runs as smoothly as the day I got it. And the moral of this story really is to be careful what you wish for. Manifesting is real, and the energy you put out into the world matters. I could have lost my life, or worse, my son's or my mom's. So words have power, and I need everybody to understand that you need to use them wisely. I hope you all enjoyed some of my stories as a medium. If I can think of any others, I will gladly do another video. Have a great day or night. Love and light.